this video, I'm going to explain why, for me, Tana is a more interesting, more flexible, and more powerful app than Notion. The Supertag is the foundational feature of Tana. It's how you organize information, and it competes very well with Notion's database structure in a way that I think makes it more interesting and more powerful. And I think most importantly, it's relevant to every single new user of Tana who is just getting started. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. In case you're new here, I'm Jake. It's so great to meet you. Thank you for checking out my video. I've spent the past 10 plus years being an early adopter of productivity apps and getting a little bit obsessed with the ones that I think are amazing. I was an early adopter of Notion. I was an early adopter of Roam Research. And most recently, I've become an early adopter and an ambassador to an app called Tana, which I think is the most interesting of all of them. I've used Tana over the last couple of years to manage my startup, to selling my startup, to now transitioning into a new career in data science at Stripe. So I think these things are super powerful and can unlock a lot of value for all of you. In my channel, I'm going to be going through some of the things that I love about Tana and probably over time, additional things that are more general about productivity. All right, let's get into it. All right, to show the differences between Tana and Notion in terms of tracking things and the flexibility that I believe is superior in Tana, we're gonna do a side-by-side demo. And what we're gonna do for both of these apps, so Tana's here on the left, Notion's here on the right. What we're gonna do is we're gonna walk through how we might track our friends. I think this is a very simple example we can all relate to. We all can kind of understand why we might want to have a list of friends and save some information about them. And we're gonna go through each of these and we'll see where we land. So I think there are three things that really matter here. One is creating the structure where we're going to tag stuff. So that in Tana is going to be a super tag. In Notion, it's going to have to be a database. The next thing is tagging new things. So now that we have our structure, how do we add things into that structure? And then finally, it's using those things that we've created in the structure in day-to-day life. So I'm going to go through all three of these side by side. Okay, number one is creating the structure to track our friends. So let's start with Tana. Tana has a concept of super tags. By the way, I have a whole video going much deeper into what super tags are, so check it out over there. In order to create a super tag in Tana, it's as simple as writing the name of one of your friends and tagging it with the word friend. So I'm just gonna say Seth, and I'm gonna tag it with friend, and voila, you now have a friend super tag. There are other ways to do this. You could say friend here and then convert it to super tag, which I'm not gonna do since I just did that. Well, I did, but I undid it. Or you can say super tag, create new super tag, and then it would take you to this configuration screen. So those are at least three ways that you have to create super tags. But this first one that I did, I think is the simplest and easiest one. Okay, so moving over to Notion, how would I do something similar? Really do the same thing. There's no concept of tags, so that doesn't really make any sense. Notion's references are using @ symbols, which Tana has a similar concept, but I don't have a page called Seth. I could create a sub page, which would just be a page. It wouldn't really necessarily be connected to any concept of friends. We'll get back to this in a minute. Basically, what we need to do here is we have to actually start from the idea that we want the structure, and then later we can add people to it. So I'm gonna say database inline, and now we can create a database called friends pretty easily. Okay, so we have a database called friends, and I can say Seth. All right, so that's pretty easy. But now, of course, I have this big table, and it's sitting in the middle of my page. Is that what I want? I'm not exactly sure. But that's pretty much it for creating the structure in Tana versus Notion. By the way, I want to make sure this is clear here on the side here of Tana, that although all we see is one node, which is Seth tagged as friend, we do actually have a whole structure for friend created behind the scenes. It just is placed sort of not in the context where you're working. And I can show you this. If I click on friend, every super tag by default gets essentially the equivalent to this, right? It's a database view of all the things that were tagged as friend, but it goes somewhere called schema, which is, when you create new tags and we make new references to things, they get created somewhere else, which actually helps keep our inline focus very clear. Okay, so part two is tagging new things, right? So we have a structure for friend in Tana, we have a database for friend in Notion. Now let's say I want to track a new friend. How would I do that? Well, we already kind of saw how this works in Tana. All I'd have to do is say Tanya friend. So now I have a second friend. Another thing you can do is tag things in line. So instead of here where we created a new node and tagged the whole node as friend, possibly you're describing something about your friend and you don't want the whole node to be friend, right? If I wrote got drinks with Peter last night, you wouldn't want to tag this whole thing as friend because now it thinks your friend's name is got drinks with Peter last night. So what we're going to do is undo that, undo these, and I'm going to come here, I'm going to select Peter, and you can tag just this selection as a friend. So that's pretty cool. Now we can expand this node of Peter, and we see that it looks kind of like these two up here, but we've made an inline reference to Peter's friend node. Okay, that's Tana. So now in Notion, how would we create new entries into this friends table? Well, clearly we can come in here and we can say Tanya. We can also say Peter. But of course, the question, the issue that raises is, well, what if we're not looking at this friends table, and do we want to create this reference another way or entry another way? And how do we do that? And so, let's do this example, got drinks with, let's delete Peter and do the same thing here, drinks with Peter last night. So can I do this? I could say Peter, let's capitalize it. Okay, so Notion actually does give us a feature. This is, I think, pretty new. This used to definitely not exist, but I could say make a new page called Peter in Friends, and there you go. So this actually accomplished a lot of the same things as this, which I think is pretty cool. So yeah, that's I guess part 2, which is tagging new things. So we saw on Tana how there are a few different ways to do it. In Notion, there also are a few different ways to do it. I would say they're pretty cool here, to be honest. I mean, it's, I think there's more typing and clicking required here in Notion, right? Like, just to reiterate, if I do Joe, I have to do @Joe. I can't really type Joe friends. Like, if I wanted to, I don't know if this is like a big difference, but I have to like select this, then search for friends, which I feel is a little bit more friction than just like saw Joe friend, which, it's a little cleaner, but it's really not a big difference. So I'll say on 2, in terms of entering new things, it's pretty close. All right, well, then there's the third part, which is actually using these things over time, right? So it's, of course, pretty simple to just tag a bunch of stuff, but then like what happens over time as we want to enrich the information that we have in here, right? We have Seth, we have Tanya, we have Peter and Joe, same as in Notion, but right now we're not capturing any additional information about them. And in real life, we're gonna talk to them, we're gonna email them, we're gonna see them, we'll want to remember to buy them birthday presents, we'll want to remember when their birthdays are, all that kind of stuff. So let's talk about how to do both of those in Tana and in Notion. And I think they're not too different, but I think there's some interesting pieces here. All right, so I think first thing that we want to do is look at the idea of the page for that thing, right? So if I click on Joe here, and then I click on Joe here, it's not terribly different. And I'll keep this as the sidebar. The concept is sort of the same here. We have like as much space as we want to say stuff about Joe, just the same thing here, right? I can say, Joe, we met in college, and I can do the same thing here, right? So we have similar information. Then there's this thing called properties that both have as well. So we have, let's say, a date, right? We want to say birthday. So we'll call it birthday, and we'll say we already picked the type. Date format might just be, I don't really know what that means. And we can say Joe's birthday is February 1st, right? It's weird, dates will always require a year, which makes this a bit weird. He probably wasn't born yesterday. But we can say here that Joe in Friends should also get birthday, right? And we can change this to a date, and we can say February 1st. So far, pretty similar. So what just happened when we added birthday? So in Notion, we added birthday, and it's now on the table for Friends, right? So now Tanya will have a field for birthday, and so will Seth. And so we can populate these things too. That's cool. Let's see what happens on our Friends table. And again, we click here. We see, oh, okay, that's interesting. That's not the same. Why is that? Well, actually, we added birthday only onto Joe. We don't know for sure. We haven't told Tana yet that we want to have this be on all friends. But we can tell Tana here to add it to the template. And now it's the same exact thing. For Friends, birthday will be here. Here, birthday. It didn't show up by default in this view because this view had already been created. But what we can see is now every friend has a birthday as well, right? So, okay, so the concepts are pretty similar. We have, properties that we have each entry in the database. Like I said, we had birthdays, and then we have sort of like a free form that'll just be like idiosyncratic notes just for that one particular thing. There's probably a second video to be made here around the differences in properties between Notion and Tana. And I would say this is definitely an area where Notion is more mature. Notion has a decade on Tana, and they have some incredibly great features when it comes to databases and what you can do in these sorts of types of fields here. And Tana is catching up to that, but it will probably take some time. What I want to focus on is just using this stuff that we have here in the easiest possible way over time, right? So let's go back to our example, right? And let's just say we meet a new friend for their birthday and we want to actually write down what their birthday is and how we would do that in the two sides. So had dinner with Jane for her birthday last night. And then I'll do the same thing here. Her birthday last night. So great. So what we need to do is we need to tag Jane as a friend. So we'll do that there. And here we actually have to start over there and say add new Jane page in. I can't have to click it. Okay, so we've got Jane there. And now the question is, how do we add her birthday? So of course, like I said before, we happen to be in this example setting where I'm seeing this table, but let's just imagine that we weren't. Let's imagine we were just somewhere else and this table was nowhere to be found. There we go. And now we're like, okay, well, it's Jane. How do we get to her birthday? So we could click on her and add her birthday, and which is the same in Tana. But one, I think, killer feature that we have in Tana that Notion does not have is the ability to expand inline these references. And so I could say I had dinner with Jane for her birthday last night. I'm in context of this thing where I know that her birthday was last night here, and now voila, Jane has a birthday. So is that a massive difference? Up to you to decide. I think that's amazing. I love the idea that I don't have to leave where I am to do really powerful stuff in Tana. And that to me is a flexibility giver that Tana has that I think no other app I've ever used has. And that is a massive difference for me. Now, to wrap it up, I just want to demonstrate one more tiny thing. And that is that, we did all of this just with a very simple example of friends. But let's just say I got drinks with Peter last night at bar A. And I got dinner with him at restaurant at bar B. Let's just say we want to track bars and restaurants, right? And I can do the same thing here. So which one do you think is going to be faster or easier to create a structure that we want to use to track restaurants, right? Tana, I just go restaurant. Boom. Bar A is now tagged as a restaurant, which did not exist before. And bar B, so not only did we tag it as a restaurant, but we created the super tag restaurant. And likewise with bar B. And you can see that I now have a table with both restaurants in my schema. Cool. Now in Notion, we went through the three pieces, and this is the one where Tana clearly outperforms Notion, is the creation of new structures. So there's no real way for me to say bar A, right? If there's nowhere to put it, I can't create it, is basically the way to think about this in Notion. So what we would need to do first is we would need to say new table in line, or it's called database, database. And I'm using the wrong shortcut, of course. And it's not necessarily fair because I don't use Notion every day, but still, you can kind of get the point of what I'm trying to say here is these little pieces of friction add up over time. And, there we go. We finally were able to do this. Starant. There we go. Okay, so that took a decent amount of thinking. And again, I think what I'm trying to explain or demonstrate is every tiny little step of friction where you have to think, what was the name of that page or where should I put that thing? To me, those things really add up and really make a difference over the course of days and weeks and months and years of using a tool like this. And so, I think the superpower of Tana is the not needing to think about that kind of stuff as you're using. All right, so that's it for now. Hopefully you are convinced that Tana at least is worth trying over Notion for certain things. Please use my link below. I'll get a little kickback from Tana. I really appreciate the support. And also check out my website where I have some templates that'll help you get started in Tana.